Welcome back, everybody. So now we're going to go over Tema 2, or Tema dos. So the first thing that I want to do is point out the similarity between Latin and Spanish. Now, I've kind of put together the Latin amar, amare, and then the Spanish amar. And as you can see, they are very similar. Now, you might be like, what is this table? Well, I am glad you asked. So, the first thing that we need to kind of go over is the pronombres, pronouns. So, in English, we have these as I, you, he, she, it, we, and then like y'all and they. Now, if you think about the way that our verbs work in English, it would be I sit, you sit, he, she, it sits, we sit, y'all sit, they sit, using to sit as just sort of my dummy verb. In Spanish, you're going to have a different form for each of these pronouns. So here we have the singular, so singular and plural. This is the first person, this is the second person, and this is the third person. So the way that this works is first person is if the speaker themselves is in the group. So I or we. So if there's many speakers that are like you that are proverbially using the same tone, like if the speaker is part of the group that they are representing, then it's the first person plural. Now, if you're referring to somebody else, if the speaker is referring to one person whom they are addressing, it's the second person, which can be singular or, as we kind of covered, plural. And then third person is when you are referring to a different object or entity. So this is kind of the table that we have set up for when we talk in Spanish. And this table will stay the same. We probably won't use y'all all that much because that's Spain Spanish, vosotros. But I will just mention it and say that it exists. So the I is yo. You is tú. He, she, it is él, ella. And now here's what's interesting. There is a second you in Spanish, as we kind of went over in the first. There's the tú and there's the usted. Tú, as a reminder, is informal. Usted is formal. So when we talk about the third person, that's the form that usted uses. So in order to show your further formality, it's like addressing somebody in the third person, like when you're talking to the queen, you'd be like, Your Majesty, right? And so you're kind of referring to them with this extra title. So él, ella, and then we're going to squeeze usted in there. And then we, I'm going to put quotation marks around this. We is nosotros. And they is ellos, ellas. And just like how we squeezed in the usted form over on the he, she, it, we squeeze in the ustedes form, which is like talking to a formal group of people, like all of you. Like think if you're talking to a board of CEOs, you would use this. So ellos, ellas, ustedes. Now, one thing that's important to note is there's also nosotras. But this tends to be pretty rare because in Spanish, being a male-dominated language, you can have just here, I'll illustrate it this way. You can have a bunch of women, right? So let's say each of these dots is a woman. It's the pink dots. And there's this one blue dot that's a guy. Now, if we're just talking about this group and they're referring to themselves, let's say this is the person who's speaking, she would say nosotras, right? But if even one man enters the group, it becomes nosotros, right? So if it's these three women, it would be nosotras. But if it's these people, it would be nosotros. Similarly, if we say someone from the outside is talking about these people, if they see this group of women, they would call them ellas, they, in English. We have, again, a neutered they, but in Spanish, it's gendered. So they would say ellas. And then if even one guy enters, it'd be ellos. So I hope that kind of clears up how pronouns work in Spanish. So I'm going to go ahead and make the conjugation table here. Yo, tú, él, ella, usted. That's an abbreviation for usted, which I will probably use quite a bit. Nosotros. That's an abbreviation for nosotros. We don't really have the y'all. That would be vosotros, but again, that's Spain Spanish, so we are not going to use it. And then ellos, ellas, ustedes. So if we want to conjugate, let's say, the AR verb, to love, amar. Yo amo. That means I love. Tú amas. That means you love. Él, ella, usted ama, which means he, she, or you formal love. Nosotros is amamos, which means we love. Ellos, ellas, ustedes would be aman, which means they, or you plural, formal love. So this is the form for the AR verbs. All AR regular verbs, if it ends in an AR, right here, then it's going to follow this conjugation form. Well, but not all Spanish verbs fall into this category. There's two other big categories. So we're going to go ahead and take a copy of this and pull it over so that we can hopefully compare the two. So here's my AR, and I'm going to change this to the other big group, which is ER verbs. And so for my sort of like quintessential example here, we're going to use comer. So yo como, I eat. Oops. Tú comes, you, informal, eat. Él, ella, usted come. He, she, or you, formal, eat. Nosotros comemos, we eat. And then ellos, ellas, ustedes, they, or you, plural, or like you guys, formal, comen. They eat. And so, as you can kind of see, between AR and ER, it's fairly similar. You have the O in the first person. For tú, you have the S at the end. And before it, you have the verb sort of like identifying vowel. There we go. That was the word. And then at the end, you have just the identifying vowel. And then the amos or amos. So the mos is the same. And then you have your identifying vowel. And then again, you have the identifying vowel here and here, but it ends in N. So as you can see, they're fairly similar. They just have a little bit of difference with the identifying vowel. There is one other group which is a lot smaller, which is the ir verbs. And this would be our sort of dummy example is vivir, right? Go ahead and copy these again. Now, a lot of the time, you won't see the ir verbs because they're just less common. There are a couple that sort of float around and exist, and those are important, but certainly it's less common than the other two. So we can take our little conjugation. Yo vivo. No surprises there. Tú vives. So instead of using the being vivis, it changes to vives. So it kind of borrows from its neighbor, the er verb, which is a lot more common. And then el ella usted vive. Again, a lot like the er verbs. This is the only part that's tricky. Nosotros vivimos. Oh, we see the identifying vowel come back in just the nosotros form. And then ellos, ellas, ustedes viven. A lot like the er verbs. So, as you can see, there is definitely a pattern amongst all of these different verb groups, but you just kind of have to look and know which ones you're looking for. So, I'm going to do another set of examples. But first, we're going to just do a quick drill. So, I'm going to sort of point toward a pronoun up here, and I just want you to say what it is in Spanish. You, informal. Tú. They, ellos, ellas, yes. You, plural, formal. Ustedes, yeah. We, nosotros o nosotras, depending on the situation. He, she, él, ella, and then you, formal. Usted. And then, of course, best for last, I. Yo. Very good. So we're going to do another pass with these, with different verbs. So for the AR, we have pasar. So just try to say what you think it's going to be. So yo paso. Tú pasas. Él, ella, usted pasa. Nosotros pasamos. And then ellos, ellas, ustedes pasan. Good. So if you need to go back over that section, you definitely can. Now for the ER verbs. For some reason, I'm only coming up with comer. So let's skip that one for now. So now for the IR verb. Okay, escribir. Yo escribo. Tú escribes. Él, ella, usted escribe. Nosotros escribimos. Ellos, ellas, ustedes escriben. Good. All right. And now for the ER verb. Beber. I don't know why all of my words are food related. All right. Yo bebo. Tú bebes. Él, ella, usted bebe. Nosotros bebemos. Ellos, ellas, ustedes beben. Good. So I hope that gives you kind of an overview of how conjugation works in Spanish. It's a little bit of a foreign system to native English speakers, but we're going to slowly work on this muscle and build this skill up. So don't worry about it too much for right now, and just try to focus on internalizing how the system works. All right. Well, I will see you guys later for Tema 3. Adios.